Hello and welcome to another Sprues and Brews video, and today we are looking at the Warhammer Age of Sigmar role-playing game Soulbound by RPG experts Cubicle 7. So we have already done a written review of this RPG system over on spruesandbrews.com. The link and details will be in the description below. We've actually been kindly sent an actual physical copy of the book by Cubicle 7, so we wanted to do a video basically showing off the contents within. So I'm obviously going to touch through different elements of the book for those who haven't read the review, but I'm not quite maybe going to go into as much detail as Matt did in his original written review. So make sure you check that out. Soulbound is the very first RPG to be based within the mortal realms of Age of Sigmar. So us here at Sprues and Brews are really excited to see what this was going to bring to the table, really, because we're big fans of the Mortal Realms and the Age of Sigmar game system. Cubicle 7 are known for their RPGs. They also do Wrath and Glory, if you're more into the 41st Millennium and Warhammer 40k, but this is solely for Age of Sigmar. So we'll open up the book, and the first thing you're greeted to is the Great Parch, which is a segment of the realm of Akshi, the realm of fire, which the lore in this book is mainly featured on. So Soulbound, to begin with, really wanted to set your games within the realm of Akshi, but as you'll see as we go through the book, you don't have to. You know, you can set your games wherever you want, maybe in a different mortal realm. What this book is great at, though, is really delving into the realm of Akshi and giving you inspiration for your adventures within that particular realm, how day-to-day life goes in this particular realm. So if you do want to start on your first Soulbound campaign, it's probably well worth setting it within Akshi because you've got more resources at your disposal. So some fantastic artwork. You'll see throughout this book that it is really well presented. There's lots of fantastic illustrations and lots of cool lore as well, of which the book does open out with, as well as your full contents and your introduction to Soulbound. So the Soulbound is basically a term for a group of heroes that have been bound together to protect the mortal realms. You play, as a character in this RPG, you play a soulbound hero. So you're bound with a group of heroes known as the Binding. So basically your player group is the Binding. And you are all sort of brought together to, combat all the dangers of the mortal realm, in particular Akshi. So your games master is going to be setting you out on a task that, you all have to work together to complete. You might not get on, but you've been bound together in order to win victory, basically. If you have been soulbound, if you're a soulbound hero, you don't age, and you also heal your wounds very quickly. So this works well in an RPG element. It makes things a little bit easier to create stories around. You can still potentially die, but if you do, then your soul is also protected against Nagash. So that's pretty cool. It gives you a bit of an easier approach to creating an RPG adventure as a games master. So that's really cool. And it gives you a reason why the group of players that are taking part in this adventure are together fighting against whatever it is the games master's thrown at them. So these opening few pages basically explain the basics of how this RPG will work, and obviously gives a really good amount of lore to kick things off, and some fantastic artwork as well. One of the biggest components of an RPG is the character creation, and this book really delves into creating the character that you're going to be playing as throughout this RPG, and also ultimately helping you form the party with your friends that the games master will then take onto this adventure into the mortal realms. So this section breaks down all the different species. Every species has an actual bonus. So for example, for the Dwarden, you get 2 extra wounds. So 2 additional spaces on your wound track. So, it gives you if you're not sure what you want to play as, maybe you want to look at how you want to play the game. That might help you choose a species. If you're, as we're going through this book, if you're a fan of Age of Sigmar, then you may already have an idea of what you want to play as. Maybe you play as a particular army, or you like a particular, I don't know, race in the Mortal Realms. You might already have a head start on what you want to play as because, at the end of the day, you want to play as something you really enjoy. If you're going into this, a bit more blind, this really breaks down each species and really delves into the background of the race, inspiring you to, pick that particular species. This section goes on to explain attributes and skills and talents, and also gives you some great examples of names, because every great hero needs a name. You can use these as inspiration, or of course you can pick one of the ones from the actual book itself. It goes down to physical appearance, distinguishing features. It really goes into a lot of detail, creating the character, which I think is great. I'd be tempted, when we come to play this, once the world returns a bit more back to normal, to actually model a character that I could use in game based on what I choose in the RPG. So if you're into the actual hobby itself and the models, you might want to create a miniature to, represent the character you've created in Soulbound. I mean, look, it breaks down like, if you can't decide, you can roll a d6 and choose your types, your eye colour, your hair colour. If you're very indecisive, this book's got your back. It also goes on to help you choose your goals and achieving your goals. Goals are important because you can earn experience from them, thus helping your character develop and learn new skills, abilities as you progress through the RPG. And of course, long-term goals as well. It helps you create the party, so between you and your friends, creating the perfect party for this adventure into the Mortal Realms. And then you've also got 10 key questions to really build up the background of your character. So, what is your family like? Why did you leave home? Who is your greatest ally or best friend? That could be important because that might help the dynamic of the party. Not all parties in RPGs get along, so there might be a particular species you don't get on with, maybe a particular archetype. So that's really cool. I love RPGs that really delve into the character creation. It goes on to explain melee. So I think it will obviously go into a bit more detail later on in the book, but I will say now that the actual mechanics of the game use something called a difficulty number. So it basically makes it a lot easier to do actions, to do combat as you progress through the RPG. I know a lot of other RPGs are very complicated in modifiers and what you need to roll to achieve, whatever you want to do, for example, attack or something you're investigating. Difficulty number really makes it a lot more easier to kind of get into, but we'll touch on that a little bit more as we progress through the book. But this does break down your melee, your accuracy, your defense, your armor, your wounds, your toughness, which is all very important as you progress through the game. You've got a couple of pages here to explain how you fill in your character sheet. This is printed towards the back of the book so that you can photocopy it and create your characters for your party. I believe you can also purchase them separately as well, I'm pretty sure. And so we move on to archetypes. This is basically the class of which you'll play with your particular character. So some of these are locked in depending on what species you are. So for example, if you're a human, you could choose to play as a battle mage. You could choose to play as a Blackheart Corsair, a Darkling Sorceress, a Trade Pioneer. Each of these also have a further breakdown of what kind of human you are. So for example, if you do choose to be a Blackheart Corsair, then you're going to be of the Darkling Coven. So it further breaks down your character and gives you more of a backstory. All of your different Mortal Realms sort of order factions are in here. So you've got your Fire Slayers and your different archetypes for the Fire Slayers. You've got the Caradron Overlords. which are really cool. Who doesn't like the Caradron Overlords? You've got your Stormcast. You've got your Sylvaneth. So you've got lots of archetypes to choose from, all depending on how you like to play the game. Obviously, some are more sort of tanky. You've got casters. You've got some with lots of cool abilities. So it really depends on what kind of character you want to play as in the RPG. You've then got a breakdown of all the skills and talents you can learn. Obviously, some will be kind of mute for some archetypes, but others will be incredibly helpful. These are earned throughout the game. All the different talents. An important thing to note with the archetypes is it actually gives you a box. Now, where you know, most RPGs, you start off with pretty much nothing. You're starting the game as this brand new hero, not much to his name or her name. With Soulbound, you can actually dive into almost a ready-made character. This makes the RPG a little bit easier to start. There's not so much of the sort of building your character up. You're really a hero as soon as you start the game, with different abilities and equipment, so you can get stuck straight in. This also makes life easier for a games master as well, because your party's already going to be able to take on foes and really push on with the adventure. So this breaks down your stats. It tells you what your core skills, your normal skills, your talents, and your starting equipment is, which is brilliant. And of course, any currency that you might potentially have as well. It just makes life a lot easier if you just want to get, you know, maybe you don't have time to have an RPG that might run over months and months and months. You want something a little bit more fast flowing. By having sort of these starting attributes, it really helps you start the game quickly and easily. I really like some of the equipment in this book. So, for example, if you're a Knight Venerator, you can take a Star-Fated Arrow, which is very cool. So basically, your next range attack you make ignores the armor of your target. So that's a really cool piece of equipment. You've got miracles. These are kind of like prayers, I guess, in the game. So they're not quite magic, although there is magic in this game. Like I say, they're more like prayers that when they go off, they give specific either individual buffs or party buffs. The game features a number of equipment and, of course, currency as well. This is obviously what you'll use to buy equipment or buy your way through the game. This explains basically how the currency works. One thing I will note at this point, actually, while we're going through this book, is even if you maybe aren't a massive fan of RPGs, but you play a lot of the Age of Sigmar tabletop game, maybe you want to create your own campaign with your friends that you can play through with your armies, I would definitely recommend picking this book up because it really goes into background of the Mortal Realms, in particular, of course, the Realm of Fire in this particular case. It covers all like the currency, you know, what people are doing in the Mortal Realms on a day-to-day basis. So it really might inspire you to create a campaign that you can play through with your friends, and it allows you to go into quite a lot of detail. So obviously this book is aimed, you know, to play through the RPG, but it is also a great book for source material, for campaigns, for maybe backgrounds to armies that you want to make. Like we've already covered, it goes into quite a lot of detail about each of the different races. So it's still definitely worth picking up for that reason as well. You have a plethora of melee weapons and range weapons that you can acquire during the course of the game, or some of them you might actually start with if you're jumping straight in with one of the previous archetypes where you have like the stats that you start with. All the different weapons and armors have different traits and abilities. Again, this book details those. So you created your character, you've got your equipment, you understand how the currency works, you know a little bit about the mortal realm that you're going to be taking this adventure into. It's time to get into the rules. And this is, of course, is important because this is how you do combat, how you progress through the RPG. And it's all really centered around something that I mentioned earlier on called difficulty number. So this is represented by, it's abbreviated to DN in this, an X and a Y figure. X is the first number that you'll see. That is the difficulty rating of the action that you're about to take. So for his example here, you've got DN, 4 and a 2, and it's a dexterity check. So the 4 represents the difficulty. So this is what you need on a dice roll. So on a D6 roll, you need 4 or more. The 2 is represented by how many of those successful dice rolls you would need to make. So in this case, you would need to have 2 4+ dice rolls in order to perform the action. It goes on to say the number of dice you roll when making a test is referred to as your dice pool. Your dice pool for a test is determined by your attribute score plus your level of training with the skill being tested. So with this example, it would be dexterity. So if you're really dexterous, then you might find it easier. You'll have more dice to roll in order to gain the 2 successes that you require on 4 or more. This is a lot more straightforward than some other RPGs, which require a lot of sort of working out, checking out your attributes. What are you fighting? What are you trying to investigate? It kind of slows the game down. This makes it a lot easier to perform your sort of common tests and your combats. Breaking the difficulty numbers down further, you have a table here which details the difficulty level. So as an example here, a difficulty number of 2 over 1 is very easy. This could be climbing up onto a wall. As we work up the difficulties, you'll see that the number required is getting higher. So that represents it getting a lot harder. So for example here, 6 over 1, very hard. Scale a sheer cliff face made of smooth glass. I mean, that just sounds solid as it is. So no wonder you need a 6. Again, it makes it easier for games masters to set the difficulty of the task that the players are trying to achieve. The next part of the book delves into the mortal realms. So this is giving you background on where you are playing. Like previously said, this book really concentrates a lot on the realm of Akshi. However, the book does talk about the other mortal realms and the Age of Sigmar game system, just in case you want to set your games in a different realm. It talks about different things that you might come across, for example, realm gates and the free cities of the realms. What life in the realms is like, daily life, how the normal citizens go about work. It also touches on the Necroquake as well, which was a pivotal moment between the first system of Age of Sigmar and its current iteration, the second edition, which came about after the Necroquake and the start of the Soul Wars. The book really breaks down each of the different realms that you can set your RPG in. Obviously goes into a little bit more detail for Akshi, but all the other mortal realms are given a mention in this book. Again, presented really nicely. And as I said before, perfect for campaigns for Age of Sigmar in general as well. So when we first opened the book, we were greeted by this beautiful map of the Great Parch, a part of the realm of Akshi. The book does a fantastic job with beautiful illustrations of detailing all the landmarks and places that you can visit and see in the Great Parch. And of course, a lot of these might, be locations that you end up in during the course of your campaign, either created by Games Master or a pre-created adventure in one of the Soulbound supplements or the Games Master screen. One of the most fun elements of Soulbound is that of magic. So if you have a particular archetype character that can use magic, then you're in for a massive treat, because there are so many different spells and things that you can do during the course of the RPG. This talks about all the different abilities and spells that you can learn and that you can use. Again, it's using the difficulty number to say how you are able to cast that spell. So for example here, difficulty number of 4, so you need a 4 on a dice, and you just need to have 1 success. Spells, however, as awesome as they are, they do have a price of failure. So potentially, if you don't cast a spell, if something goes wrong, then the spell could potentially, for example, come alive and cause damage to you. There are quite a number of different spells to get and to see during the course of the campaign. An RPG wouldn't be an RPG without a games master. So if you are the person leading this RPG, then this book will talk you through how you go about sort of playing through the campaign, how you control the party that your friends are playing as you progress through this campaign. It really wants to make it as easy as possible to play through the RPG. You've got various toolbox options. It gives you flexibility as well in running your campaign. The last major segment of the Soulbound book is the Bestiary, and this is where you're going to find all the stats for the different characters and enemies and pets that you're going to encounter as you progress through the game. They all have clear boxes of all their attributes, the toughness values, any abilities that they may have, and of course things like wounds and attacks characteristics. What I really like is that it actually breaks it into all your enemies into their own sub-factions. So for example, you've got Blades of Khorne, so you've got different Khornite enemies that you might fight, some Flesh Hounds, for example, Bloodletters. You've got the Disciples of Tzeentch, you've got Horrors, you could be fighting against the Gaunt Summoner, Zangor Shaman there. You've got the Maggot King of Nurgle. You could even be fighting a Great Unclean One if your Games Master wanted to give you a bit of a challenge. You've got Skaven. You've also got Legions of the Undead, you've got Legions of the Nagash, and you've also got Bone Reapers later on in this book as well. So lots of different enemies that you can be fighting against. Again, whether or not they be predetermined by a particular adventure that you're running that's been predetermined, or if your Games Master's cooked up their own brand new adventure for your party. To round out the book, we do have a page which details at a quick glance the conditions that can affect your character, and of course we've got the previously mentioned character sheets which you might want to photocopy from this book when creating your characters. Again, I think you can purchase this separately, which I think it would be better, to be honest. If you can get copies of these that are already printed, that would be great. And it allows you to fill in all your details about your character, all your backstory, all the gear that you're carrying to go on this adventure with. And then, of course, you've got an index. So if you very quickly wanted to check a particular ruling, or you're looking for a particular ability that you're not sure how that works, you can quickly and easily find it in the index. And that brings us to the end of this particular book. Again, we've got another look at the Great Parch, this particular part of Akshi, where a lot of the lore in this book is focused on. So there we go. So Soulbound looks to be an absolutely fantastic RPG book. One thing this book does not have is any pre-assembled adventures. You can purchase the Games Master screen, which has around about 25 adventures on there. And we have also got a series of supplements for Soulbound that are available to purchase. I think there's one that focuses on starting life on a Caradhran airship as they're in the realm of Akshi. So it's a shame there's not like an example adventure in here. But what this book is very good at is, if you wanted to be a Games Master and create your own story, your own RPG adventure in one of the Mortal Realms, this book gives you everything you need to get the ball rolling. I really like the way the actions work. I think it's really straightforward. The difficulty rating with the difficulty number is very straightforward. What I also really like about this book is all the different opponents that you can face. As a games master, it really allows you to flex your imagination on what you might throw your Soulbound party members into as you progress through the Mortal Realms. It's a great book. The presentation is fantastic. The artwork is brilliant. And as I mentioned earlier, even if you're not a fan of RPGs, but you are a fan of the Age of Sigmar tabletop game, it might still be worth you purchasing this book because there's so much lore that we haven't seen in any of the battle tomes or on any websites or in any expansion books, such as currency, such as breaking down what goes on in the realms. Fantastic. It's a really, really good read. Really, really good. So definitely recommend picking it up. That was a very quick run through the book. There are various things that I didn't go through. For example, I didn't really go into the skills and talents. I also didn't go through the book details all the different gods and choosing, you can actually choose a religion to follow. And it also details all the gods and such of each of the different grand alliances, order, death, chaos, and destruction. So there's a whole lot of content in this book. It's well worth picking up. If you do want to read a little bit more of a detailed sort of overview of Soulbound, do check out the link in the description. I highly recommend it. Matt did a fantastic job on that earlier on in the year when we were very kindly given the PDF to run through when the game first launched. Our thanks to Cubicle 7 for providing this book for this video, and I for one cannot wait until we get a Sprues and Brews Akshi RPG adventure on the go, when hopefully we can all get round a table once again. So yeah, that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you've enjoyed this look at Soulbound, and I will see you again very soon in another Sprues and Brews video. Until then, happy hobbying!